Hi guys, I'm Lisa. Welcome back to the channel. Our employers give our bosses authority over us by virtue of where their position falls on the org chart, and generally speaking, we respect that authority. But when authority starts to encroach on our needs and our rights, that's when you'll see people start to challenge authority. I'd always respected my boss's authority until she refused to discuss reasonable accommodation with me. And at that point, she forced me to choose between respecting her authority and taking care of myself. And I chose me. Duh. So I filed a complaint against her and appealed to a higher authority, the law. There are some serious flaws with the EEOC process, but in spite of those flaws, it does give us a voice and at least a chance at justice. Our employers are powerful, but with the law on our side, we're not totally powerless. Today I wanted to talk about some other sources of power that we employees have. Courage gives us the power to do what we need to, even though we're afraid. And we all have it, or we wouldn't be here. After I filed my complaint against my boss, I was afraid every day that today was going to be the day that she was going to succeed in firing me and have me escorted off post by men with guns. I knew that I'd be able to appeal any kind of adverse action to the Merit Systems Protection Board, and I was confident that I'd prevail there, but I still dreaded the humiliating ordeal. Every morning when I made the commute, that fear was looming in the back of my mind, but I just pasted a smile on my face, walked through the door anyway, and did what they paid me to do, my job. I'm badass. You're badass too, so give yourself credit. Community gives us strength to persist and prevail. Our employers know that's power, and that's why they try so hard to isolate us. I found a small online community of EEOC professionals and other people like me who were going through the process, and that helped a lot. You don't necessarily need a huge support group. Just having a friend, a therapist, or a minister that you can talk to who's going to give you honest feedback can be a big help. Most of us employees have been in the position where we've had to manage some project or group without being anybody's boss. Doing that effectively takes influence. A huge component of influence is competence in whatever you're working on. When I was young, I had to work in a lot of machine shops, and the machinist would test all the new engineers who came in trying to tell them what to do by making us read the engineering drawings for whatever we were trying to build. And if you could do it, you were okay. If you couldn't, you were never going to get their respect. I think the same kind of thing happens in the EEOC process too. Whether you're trying to convince an attorney to take your case on contingency or trying to convince your counselor that the discrimination occurred, you're going to do better if you speak their language and understand at least a little about the process. The sooner in the process you can start building competence, the better. Knowing your work environment well enough to navigate obstacles and challenges is a huge source of power. My boss had a lot of authority, but she didn't necessarily know all the people, systems, or processes that it took to get work done. I was a pro at navigating the system. It came with having to get things done without authority for 30+ years. We all know people who won't work with us. They just seem to need to be difficult. And after I filed my complaint against my boss, she became one of those people for me. There are ways to confront people without being bossy or mean, and here are a few of the ways that I used. Asking them lots of questions not only gives them a chance to speak their mind, it also documents their thoughts and concerns. And in my EEOC claim, I found that email was the best way to do that because it was time-stamped. We all know someone who is easier to go around than to work with. When my boss wouldn't let me use the reasonable accommodations she supposedly gave me, I found another job for myself, and I submitted a second reasonable accommodations request asking that I be allowed to transfer. Unfortunately, my boss turned me down. But trying to go around her paid off anyway. At my hearing, my AJ noticed that I had tried to work around the problem. And he noticed that my boss had turned it down without even discussing it with me, which worked in my favor. Sometimes you can just ignore orders. One of the crazy things my boss tried to do after I filed my complaint against her was change the rules for how I told her that I needed to use sick leave. She said I needed to come into the office and let her lay eyes on me so that she could decide whether or not to let me use my sick leave that day. I was sick. There's no way I was going to get up, get dressed, make the commute, go find her just so she could lay eyes on me and send me home again. No. I didn't fight with her about it, but I didn't do it her way either. I just kept doing exactly what I'd always done. And I figured if she wanted to make a big fuss about that, I might have a disparate treatment case too. Don't ask, tell. Getting my boss's permission to do anything was nearly impossible after I filed my claim against her. For instance, she would ignore my request to use leave for medical appointments until days after the appointments were over. If I kept the appointments without getting her prior approval, technically I was AWOL, And since NASA's pretext was all about me being AWOL, I didn't think it was smart for me to do that. My position description said that as a senior manager, I was expected to work with minimal supervision. So instead of asking my boss if I could take leave, I started emailing her with my plans to take leave. And I told her to let me know by a certain date and time if it wasn't okay for me to do so. That way I was able to cover my butt without being held hostage by her. Sometimes the best thing you can do with an obstacle is to document it. Shortly after I filed my complaint, my boss asked me to pull together a leadership retreat. And one of the things she wanted me to do was price a keg of beer for after hours. With her accusing me of all kinds of misconduct, I didn't think it was smart for me to be researching keg prices on NASA's clock. So instead, when I got back to my office, I sent her an email, just verifying that you want me to research prices of kegs. She never answered, and the keg was never mentioned again. We can't be insubordinate, but we are allowed to have boundaries. Another one of my boss's little power plays was giving my work to other people. Usually what would happen is those people would run down the clock on the work, doing it wrong, and my boss would come in and expect me to fix it at the last minute. I always documented those requests in an email, and in that same email, I'd remind her that so-and-so had 2 weeks or whatever it was to do the job, and while I thought I could do it in less time than that, we were going to have to ask for an extension. My boss hated asking for extensions, so she stopped doing that shit to me pretty quick. We're fighting Goliath in an epic battle. Our employers are the definite favorites. But we employees aren't completely powerless. We do have a few tricks up our sleeves, and it is possible to turn the tables. That's it for today, guys. Till next week, take care and hang in.